Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Game Changer. I'm Mariam Zia. In today's program, we will be talking about the pivotal talks between IMF and Pakistan. A mission led by mission chief to Pakistan, Mr. Nathan Porter, will be meeting authorities to discuss the next phase of engagement with Pakistan. In today's program, we will be talking about different dimensions of this next engagement of Pakistan with the IMF. Of course, Pakistan is looking to implement its comprehensive economic recovery plan. What it entails, we will be talking about also the challenges when we talk about the implementation of IMF programs. When we talk about this comprehensive economic recovery plan and the next phase of engagement, of course, there are three primary components of this plan, which are taxation, energy, as well as the privatization of state-owned enterprises. What will be the challenges when we talk about the upcoming engagement with IMF? This would be 24th engagement of Pakistan, 24th IMF program of Pakistan with IMF. We will be talking about different dimensions, complexities, and of course the issues when we talk about implementations and challenges regarding IMF. When we look into the authorities and Pakistan's engagement with regards to this 24th IMF program, of course Pakistan is looking to, as per reports, engage with IMF for next 2 to 3 years and is seeking around $6 to $8 billion. What will be different dimensions of this deal or IMF program we'll be talking about in today's program. To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by President Pakistan Economic Forum, Islamabad, Mr. Humayun Iqbal Shami. Welcome to the program. We are joined online by Dr. Usman Chohan, who is economist. Welcome to the program. Dr. Usman, let me start with you. Of course, when we talk about this important IMF engagement with Pakistan, this comes at a very critical juncture for Pakistan when we talk about, of course, the completion of 23rd program. In your opinion, what will be the key areas when we talk about this engagement with IMF?
Very much for having me on your show. There's actually several areas of key import to Pakistan and to the IMF. Above all, I think that the fiscal balance is the most important, which is to say not running too high a fiscal deficit, which includes taxation and tax effort on the revenue side, and it includes mitigating government expenditure and government footprint on the expenditure side. Fiscal is the number one. The second area which is important, I believe, is the energy sector, the energy mix, and the energy liabilities. And I think there's a lot of discussion happening on how to get this in a more rationalized manner. And the third thing I think that will be of importance is the interest rate, so monetary policy. And I think that the IMF has clear views on that. And there's a lot of discussion on our side too about whether, as inflation comes down, an interest rate so high is justified. There's of course many other areas, but if I had to target three important areas, these would be the three that I would have the most concentration on, which I also believe they have the most concentration on.
Talk about external financial gap of Pakistan. How do you think, what kind of policies or measures are needed by Pakistan to fill this gap of $9.1 billion?
There's several areas that are going to be considered in terms of this fiscal gap. One is the rollover of debt from friendly countries. I think that's important to keep that minimum thing persistent. The second is the timely sourcing of finances, which includes the international markets, bond markets, once they are more open to the debt issuance, as well. And the third is the IMF for the minimum criteria. So there's several sources here. In the meantime, the government is going to continue, I predict, to rely on the banking system here for local demand, for financing of the local debt. So I think that there's multiple areas, but I believe that we have to start to think about having lower debt burden, and that includes not just the principal, but also the interest being so high. So we have to be a little bit careful with our debt sustainability, and I know that the government is very, very keen on having that issue tackled in a serious manner.
When we talk about current engagement with IMF, of course, a lot of statements coming from IMF authorities that we keep on hearing is the emphasis on reforms. In your opinion, what are the specific reforms that Pakistan can do in the short term or implement in the short term for, of course, revitalization of the economy?
The thing is that basically, our basic problems are the external finances, but since we always have been short of the export sector, and that is a dilemma with us, so at this moment, the IMF, which is focusing mostly, it wants us to implement the structural reforms, so that is actually not the, I won't say that is only the requirement for the IMF, but this is also, this is a requirement which Pakistan actually needs, because we don't have a fiscal discipline, so structural reforms are very necessary here. Then
right, but just to interject, Mr. Humayun, structural reforms is a very broad term, and
true.
we have been hearing this terminology for past
a
decade or so. But when we talk about practical measures which are needed for structural reforms, can you tell us about that? Can you elaborate on those?
Sure. One is this: is that we have to improve our tax collection. That is the main area. We have to improve our tax collection. Our tax to GDP ratio is almost 8 to 9%, 8% almost. So, which is very low. Even if we compare it to the local, in the surrounding countries like India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, it's very low. So, we have to adjust it to increase about 11, 12%. It will be good. So, this is one way that how, but we have to see how the tax, and then we have to by the phase out, we have to phase out the subsidies, what we are giving in the different fields, so that also curtails our tax, tax revenue, So, like we are giving subsidies in the agriculture sector, we are giving the subsidies
in energy sector as well.
Energy sector also. So, these are, and then we have a lot of wastages. Wastages, like we have a very big civil structure, very big civil structure, and where our that is our non-development expenses are going very high. So, this is one way that like after 18th amendment, definitely there was a need to reduce the sector, and even
and what kind of strategies are needed to reduce, of course, expenditures in these kind of because they stand at around $890 billion, which is a huge amount, and this is going into a wastage. So, what kind of concrete measures are needed in that regard?
One way. The thing is that if we look, apparently it looks, just it is written on the wall that our SOE sectors, our state-owned sectors, which is consuming about 1.3 trillion rupees every year. It's more than even that. Like DESCOs itself, only the DESCO is consuming almost 1 trillion rupees. So, the easy way, and we are trying to privatize it. Sometime we said we privatize it, then we say that we privatize only those units which DESCOs which are going in profit, but there are very few which are going in profit. I think the best solution, which I have been saying before also, that will be the easiest solution will be to transfer this liability to the provinces, wherever the, I mean, like if the LESCO and Gujranwala and Islamabad, it can be given to Punjab, and the Peshawar and Hazara, that can be given to provinces, and the benefit will be that the power theft will be, that will be curtailed, because these provinces, they have better resources to check the theft, because they have police. Province has the police, they have the patwaris are working under the, and that the patwaris, they cover even up to the union council level. So, this is a one way we can reduce this, and the federal government should only focus on the generation side. It gives in bulk, it should give the energy, the power to the provinces, and the distribution sector will be there. So, 1 trillion rupees almost can be saved only by this, which is nowadays, the federal government is bearing the expenses, and then the provinces will also be, because, and another thing is that we have seen that lots of areas which are due to the DESCOs, these relate to the provinces. Like the provincial governments are not paying that, like their water sectors are not giving, like they are getting free of card, Vasa and everything. So that will be curtailed. At least they will have a physical discipline. At this moment, the thing is this, that the federal government is generating the money. It is trying to generate the money, and the provinces have only one thing, is to spend it. So this has to be changed.
Right, right. And when we talk about change, of course, a lot of emphasis is given to the reforms, Dr. Usman. So, in your opinion, of course, IMF keeps on recommending Pakistan to implement certain reforms, especially in regards to energy sector. In your opinion, what kind of reforms are needed in the energy sector in this point in time? And also, what about the private sector? Can private sector play a role in this regard as well, in this sector as well?
This is an excellent question because energy is so important to us. If you look at the portions and components of energy from beginning to end, generation is no longer our problem. Transmission and distribution is the problem. Therefore, that's the one where we have to look at it carefully. Humayun Saab is right to point out that there are institutions that are hemorrhaging money in this, and I agree with that. So there are many ways to deal with this problem. One is to, of course, look at private sector, which you mentioned, but private sector has sometimes a dangerous role because independent power producers have hemorrhaged for a long time because of the way the contracts are for unused capacity and so on, and everybody knows that. So there are private sector may or may not, depending on the way contracts are structured, be a good or bad thing. So transmission and distribution, then we come to the next point, which is about renewable energy and on-site creation. In that, there's a lot of good work that has been done in Pakistan and around the world with things like solar. Now the government is mulling ways to reduce the net metering and therefore disincentivize the solar yield that people would come up with. And I think these types of interventions are extremely counterproductive, and I would encourage civil society to continue with their on-site renewable uptake. There are other areas also, for example, nuclear and hydropower, where a lot of work can be done. And so I believe that for us to achieve carbon neutrality, we have to think about these things more seriously, with the not private sector per se, but civil society taking an important role. And the government should look at its entirety of the chain of energy and see whether work done in one section, one component, is still rational with other components. And energy is generally not such a big issue in other countries. I think that we have made a big dragon out of this that is unnecessary. So I think we have to make it but there is one area where private sector would benefit from energy, and that is in our industrial production, because energy is more expensive in Pakistan than in neighboring competitor countries in Asia. And so it is important for us to have a competitive energy tariff that still incentivizes industrial work for economic development. So you have to see it in that context as well.
Right. So, Mr. Humayun, when we talk about revenue collection, that is another important aspect of Pakistan's engagement with IMF. How does Pakistan plan to meet the target of $1.7 trillion in revenue?
1.7 trillion in revenue. Are you talking about the revenue which is collected by the FBR?
Yes, yes, and also that are some of the expectations that are given by IMF to Pakistan in the previous engagements.
Okay, and the thing is that this year we have achieved 30%, almost we are achieving the 30% increase in the revenue, which is, I think, the highest in the country. But you have to look other way also. Other way is this, that the inflation in the country was almost 24%. So when the revenue targets are, FBR targets are fixed, they are fixed. They include inflation plus the GDP growth plus their, what actually they should be. So if you look at the inflation, it was 24%. Looking at the growth rate, it was 2%. So the increase was only 4%, because if you achieve 30%, it means that the basic increase only for 4%. So this year it depends that how much inflation is going to be in this country, because now we are expecting that the inflation rate will be around 17% in the coming year. So obviously,
which is less than the previous year.
Which will be the less, almost 7% less, maybe more than that even. So, but we have to increase our GDP, and then the thing is that when we are looking at the tax, we have to see this thing that taxes, we collect the taxes. I mean, I told you one area, which is the area is this is the agriculture income, that is no tax, which is almost, I mean, 52% of our population is engaged with the agriculture. But if you look at the tax
Right, of course, expanding the tax base is an important
very
aspect, but
important.
of course, some of the measures are the increase in, of course, the amount of tax that is being imposed on the salaried class.
Yeah.
That are some of the decisions that are going to be having political repercussions for the
So-
government. So, what do you make of that?
The thing is this, I will not recommend that the salaried class could be taxed more, because already this is one class of people which actually is paying regular taxes, and without any pilferages. So that the agriculture, and then we have these shopkeepers. We have about 4 million shopkeepers in this country, which is they are not paying any tax. This is on retail sector. So then there are certain areas, certain people. I mean, like this this estate, the real estate, where that is also, because if we look at in Pakistan, the only sector which has in past has a tremendous growth was the real estate sector. Look at the plazas in blue area, look at the big houses in the posh area, and these are growing every day. So, but these people, if looking at these people's income, how from where they are getting incomes, this is a very, it is a strange area, because that is maybe a black money, maybe they have evaded the taxes, So, we have to see from this end, and we have to be more digitalized. And then another thing is this, that which I have been pursuing, that our tax rates are very high. I mean, look at this, that our highest tax rate in this country is about 35%, and our sales tax rate is 17%, which is nowhere in the world. In Singapore, I said only 5%. So if we keep our tax rates down, it will encourage those people who are already not in the tax circle. They will voluntarily come here, because lot of people, they feel that once if they come into the tax circle, and once they become the filer, then it will become they will be almost in the clutches of the FBR. So FBR, they will screw them. So this is, but if you
Right, and these are some of the aspects, Dr. Usman, that could be revised in the upcoming budget of fiscal year 2025. So what are your expectations, and what are also your expectations or suggestions to the authorities that are going to be engaging with IMF specifically in regards to budget of upcoming budget?
There's two paths for the budget. One path that we can follow is to follow what the IMF says to the letter. That would be good for fiscal consolidation, but it has political repercussions, because it's going to be quite difficult for the average citizen. Salaried class was just mentioned. It's going to be quite tough for them. The other path we can take for the budget is that the government provides some largesse, some relief, and that's good for the people who are targeted from those programs, but it becomes very difficult to maintain that trust with the IMF if we do that. So you have two paths, and I understand and sympathize with anybody in government right now who has to take these decisions, because I believe that adherence to the IMF is very important, and at the same time I understand the misery of the common man. So it's not easy to figure out how the budget should look in the coming fiscal year.
Right, of course, Dr. Usman, this is going to be a difficult decision for the authorities that are going to be holding talks with IMF, especially when we talk about the upcoming budgets. But could you give 2-3 policy recommendations when we talk about the upcoming budget for fiscal year 24-25?
One is to take a good hard look at the energy policy, and in terms of the payments that we're making in terms of the distribution and transmission. A second is to look at the poverty incidence more carefully, and how the distribution of income is actually occurring in the cities and the rural, and therefore target your policies towards pro-poor social protection. I think that would be a good one. The third is to accelerate the divestment of the state-owned enterprises, because they are just too large, and we have to be more active in divesting ourselves of these liabilities. And the fourth is to in the federal budget, take also a look at how much the federation has to raise in revenues versus the provinces. You see, so even though it has its own budget, how much the federation has to take on versus the provinces in terms of revenue collection versus expenditure. I think that this is a good time. This budget is a good time to look at the fiscal federalism of the country. So if you can do these four things in addition to the typical incrementalism of budgeting, then you would already have a much better program. So be more forward looking this time in what is required rather than just meeting the immediate needs of the next fiscal year. That would be very helpful.
Right, right. And Mr. Mayu, when we talk about streamlining of these state-owned enterprises, of course, the government is working now on this issue as well. What kind of specific measures would you recommend in that regard? And also, what do you make of the steps that are being taken by the government at this point in time in regards to SOEs?
Regarding DESCOs, I have told you that the best way is this is the immediate solution, and it will reduce the fiscal burden on the federal government also. That is to give to the to the provinces government, and if the provinces government.
And what about privatization that is under consideration at this point in time?
The thing is this, that privatization of DESCO is it truly, I tell you, it will take 10 years to privatize them. If even if there is a political will, easy way is to give to the provinces. So it will remain in the public sector. So if the the provincial government feels that there is need to give it to the private sector, they can give it, or they can include the private sector. They can have a public-private partnership program. And then the major thing which I was very I'm very focused on that the theft will be reduced, because we have about 35% average theft in this power sector, which is the basic, which is giving a basic dent to the to the revenues of these profitability of these SOEs, DESCOs, so this is this is the easiest way. Then regarding the other one, steel mill, it has to be given to the private sector. PIA, I think this will be done very soon. It will be done. It looks that it will be done, because now this is also a condition for the IMF also, that they should go ahead before June. So I think it's the only way that. So then the other then there will be left some other, like those are revenue giving, like OGDC, like we have state life insurance. They are revenue. That's not an urgent. That's not the urgent thing. Here we can. It will be good that slowly we.
Right, but if they are burden on Pakistan's economy, and we are talking about comprehensive economic recovery plan. So, Dr. Usman, first your take on this privatization of SOEs, and also I would like your opinion on the macroeconomic targets that IMF has projected for Pakistan for the next 5 years.
To the second portion of your question, which is the macroeconomic targets, they seem to be quite ambitious. When you crunch the numbers as they are produced by the IMF and you read the reports, it seems that they're very ambitious in terms of the assumptions that are being made. It's not realistic for any country to attain that sort of achievement. So naturally, when you set a high target, you are likelier to fall short. So having set more realistic targets would have been good, I believe, on the IMF side.
In your opinion, what are those realistic targets that Pakistan can meet in next 5 years or 3 to 5 years?
So on the revenue collection, for example, a more modest target, about 60% of what was projected, would be more reasonable. Similarly, with expenditure reconciliation, about 50% of that would be more achievable. And the IMF's view on the interest rates, for example, should be taken with a grain of salt, because they think that it's fine that you have 22% interest rate, but I don't believe you should have 22% interest rate. That kind of thing. So basically, the assumptions that you pull into it, if you set a target that is extortionary or too high, then you won't be able to meet it. And for many key macroeconomic indicators, this is the case. The other question you have asked is about state-owned enterprises, and I'm totally in favor of having the divestment of these, because they're simply not manageable, because too much politics gets in the way and too many vested interests get in the way. I think Humayun Saab is right that some are revenue generating and they should be the last ones to be divested, but certainly there are many that should be. I also believe that you have to reconcile the scope of ministries. You actually don't need as many ministries, as many advisors, as many different things as you have in a government, because you have to look at the ratio of the public value created by the state relative to the costs of maintaining the state, both at the federal and provincial level. And especially at the provincial level, I don't see enough public value being created in any province. So these are the kinds of things that leave the federation quite hollow fiscally, and therefore you have to have a stronger center and more value created in the edges of the provinces, the peripheries of provinces. So the way the structure is right now, it is not entirely sustainable without external financing, and I don't want us to be dependent on external financing in the years to come.
And also, Dr. Usman, can you elaborate on the concept of macro stabilization, especially in the context of Pakistan's current economic situation?
The stabilization element has to do actually partly with local conditions, which have to be reformed, and we've discussed that. But then also partly on the global geopolitical situation, geoeconomic situation, which has been very unstable. Inflation has been caused due to exogenous factors as much as endogenous factors. There is a genocide going on in the Middle East. There is a war in Eastern Europe. They have large macroeconomic impacts for many different countries. Energy prices, for example, have been much higher in the post-COVID phase. These kinds of factors, you are trying to maintain some level of currency stability, monetary stability, fiscal stability in such an unpredictable world. So the task is very difficult for any developing country. In fact, even for developed countries, it is very tough right now. When we are targeting macroeconomic stability, we are above all aiming for lower inflation, and inflation is starting to come down just because of the year-to-year comparators. So this month has been very good, for example, much lower than the interest rate is, for example. And inflation is number one. The second is to maintain some degree of managed depreciation in the currency if you want it to depreciate. And the third that you're looking for macroeconomic stabilization is the fiscal targets, particularly on the expenditure side. That those are your decisions to spend, so you can curtail those decisions. Then you have the basis of a macroeconomic framework within which you can have the modicum of stability to then proceed towards growth, which should be the real target at the end of the day.
Right, right. And of course, when we talk about the external factors, geopolitical uncertainty is another factor. How much of a factor is this going to be when we talk about Pakistan's next engagement with IMF? And also, Pakistan has raised its voice regarding the climate finance. What kind of mechanisms are required, or what kind of expectations Pakistan should be having in this engagement with IMF, specifically regarding inclusion in international mechanisms for climate financing?
Yeah, obviously Pakistan is a big victim of the climate, global warming particularly, and we have seen in the last 2-3 there have been a lot of flooding and uncertain rains and everything was there. So Pakistan has been considered. IMF also.
Right, but 17 countries are included, but Pakistan is not one of those countries. What are the reasons, and should there be a mechanism, or is there a mechanism that countries like Pakistan who are affected by these climate changes are automatically included or become part of mechanisms for climate finance?
First of all, I'll say that Pakistan is among the first top 10 who are big
victims of climate change,
of that.
Of course.
So then the other thing, the mechanism is there, but the thing is that our studies are not very good. Like this carbon credit we can get, and so far I don't think we have earned a lot of from there, because we are one of the.
That's why I asked about the automatic inclusion in these kind of international mechanisms or for financing.
You have to work for that. So the thing is this, that we can earn a lot of things. I mean, we are the least contributor of the of the pollution or the carbon emission in the world, But even then we are not getting that credit which the India are getting, the other country, because you have to struggle. This is like a marketing, This is like how efficient you are to present your case in a proper way, what is their requirement. So this is you can charge, but I mean that's our own problem, So this is the environmental
right. And let me take Dr. Usman's Usman's viewpoint on this. Dr. Usman, how can Pakistan, in your opinion, leverage this IMF's resilience and sustainability trust, especially when we talk about climate vulnerabilities?
Hey, this is an excellent question. I agree with Humayun Saab that you have to work for it. And what that means is that you have to come up with concrete proposals for projects. What sort of climate mitigation impact it would have, what sort of carbon footprint would be reduced. If you do the legwork and you give concrete proposals, there is a ton of financing out there ready to be deployed if you can present concrete proposals. But this requires due diligence. It requires very serious competitive bids for climate finance. You have to be able to show that this is a project that is worth doing and you are going to be able to do it. And I don't see that level of work being done in terms of presenting important projects, because we understand that Pakistan is climate vulnerable, but do we have clear, concrete proposals for reducing the carbon footprint in Pakistan? That has to be done, and you can actually crowdsource this, you can crowdfund this, you can have different people, different stakeholders presenting concrete proposals rather than going the traditional route of top-down planning on climate proposals, because that takes too long and oftentimes it's shoddy work. And I don't want shoddy work, I want quick actions that can be presented to international stakeholders for meaningful projects in Pakistan. It's easy to do.
Right, but Dr. Usman, at the same time, when we talk about, you're talking about the carbon footprints, but when we talk about such international mechanisms, I was earlier asking Humayun Saab as well regarding the automatic inclusion in such kind of financing, specifically when we talk about climate vulnerabilities. Don't you think that once 2/3 of the country was submerged underwater, and of course Pakistan was victim of climate change, what more is needed to be done by the Pakistani government to raise its voice to get these kind of climate financing?
Yes, fair enough, but you're raising your voice on the problem, but you're not raising your voice on the solution. So you're not giving enough proposals of what rivers you would dam. We have for our situation, which they can help to happily finance.
Right. And when we talking about the solutions, can you give us 2-3 policy recommendations in that regard? And also, do you think that this could be an important point in discussion when we talk about this next IMF 24th package with IMF?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the IMF's core discussions will be on the energy, fiscal, and monetary, etc. But insofar as climate goes, the concrete proposals have to go for floods, for example, on the water management, where the drainage happens, where the canals are built, where the dams are built, how the water is distributed, how it is stored, those sorts of concrete things on the water side. Then even on the energy side, which renewable projects you envisage, what sort of solar uptake you have, what sort of policy you have for net metering, those kinds of things all matter in terms of tactical work. I think that for climate change, we've got the strategic onboarding from abroad and locally. Now the tactical work has to be done with specific areas we want to deal with. Soil erosion, water management, and energy renewability, I think, are 3 key areas that we need to have for climate mitigation here.
Of course, climate mitigation is important, but also attracting foreign direct investments is also important when we talk about increasing the revenues as well. But of course, government has taken some steps when we talk about SIFC. But other than SIFC, what kind of systematic measures are needed by the government to attract foreign direct investments?
One thing I tell you, the SIFC is not a new body. Basically,
Exactly.
This is only just to monitor the things. This is only. It's not an. It's not another office.
Right.
Basically,
it's just
only.
It
is only to ensure that the things are happening in the proper way and nothing
right,
else. So, and that was a requirement from the foreign investors also, because they didn't want that. With every successive government, we have a change in policies, and then
there was a lot of red tapeism as well.
Red tapeism also, and a lot of. Red tapeism is not is for some reasons also. You know that, but the reason so. But the thing is that you are right. But SIFC has ensured, particularly the Gulf areas. The Saudis and the Qatari and the UAEs, they had their demand that there should be some office to monitor that could curtail our red tapeism also. So it is not a new office, but it is only to monitor and to ensure that the policies will sustain.
Right. So
that is
how do you view the measures or strategies to attract
That's good.
foreign direct
Yeah,
investment, and
FDI
also to create a feasible environment for investors to come in and invest?
Very good question. Actually, FDI is not a small. I mean, FDI is the basic requirement for Pakistan, because it will. I mean, if we want to really eliminate we want to go away from the policies of IMF, because every time we have to go to the IMF. I mean, this is our 24th program. Probably no other country has gone 24 times with the IMF. One thing I tell you, that what investor want, there is tons of money, tons of investment is available everywhere in the world, in the Europe, America, and in Middle East also. They are looking for the avenues to invest. But the thing what they want to ensure that the policy will be the same. Their investment will be the same. There will be no hassle. There will be no policy change every second day, which in Pakistan has been happening. So this type of things are there, and then they want that we should have projects like we have our natural advantages, like we have the big scope in the corporate sector, corporate agriculture sector, corporate sector. We have a big scope in the tourism sector. We have a big scope in the IT sector. So these are the.
And now AI is going to be opening new avenues.
That is a new avenue, but at least IT, overall IT, I mean, that is a step ahead, AIT, but still in the traditional way, how much in the traditional IT sector India is achieving, how much Bangladesh is getting, and how much we are getting still, because we have not trained our people. I mean, the basic problem with the growth in IT sector is that we don't have the trained people. Our institutions, the training institutions are not up to that mark.
Right.
So tourism is one thing where we have.
So there is a lot of scope.
Lots of avenue.
And of course, we need to provide conducive environment to the investors when we talk about attracting foreign direct investments. But Dr. Usman, lastly, when we talk about this next engagement with IMF, of course, Pakistan is looking to get $6 to $8 billion as per report, which is one of the largest programs as per Pakistan's previous engagement with IMF. But of course, at the same time, IMF is going to be putting on tough conditions. What in your opinion would Pakistan be needing to do to manage this tough IMF program?
In the long run, I believe that you need to shore up your foreign reserves to such a large extent and hold on to them so that even in crisis situations, you don't need to go to the IMF. So instead of having $20 billion as we did at the end of 2021, we should have had $80 billion. There are many ways to do that, including, above all, the deployment of capital of overseas Pakistanis. Overseas Pakistanis really seem to be missing from the conversation when we want foreign investment. We're going to the Gulf, China, the US, Europe, but really it's our people abroad working hard who will have the capital and the love for Pakistan to develop it. They need to be brought into this in terms of capital so that we have enough reserves that we don't need to go to the IMF. Because the IMF has tough conditions now, they will get tougher in the future. And it'll be harder in the future unless we do the reforms, but even the reforms don't lead to growth. You cannot austerity your way to prosperity. That is just a belt tightening for a tough time. And the world's economy is in so much shift that we will continue to have tough times. So basically, I'm saying that you brace yourself, have enough of a cushion that when the next tough time comes, you don't need to go to the IMF and have tough conditions again in the future. That is the mindset you need for the next 50 years.
Of course, the long-term policy goals, or when we talk about comprehensive economic recovery plan, needs to be implemented and followed through. Thank you very much, Dr. Usman Chohan, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Humayun Balshami, for joining us in today's program. Of course, when we talk about Pakistan's economic condition, the problems are well known. Of course, we know the kind of reforms that are needed in our country, but the main issue is implementation and to follow through those reforms and policy recommendations. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah.